I think the first thing in order is to do a sound check, and I want to hear from you. Do you hear an echo? And also, do you hear me? So let me just kind of watch for a sound check. It usually will take a few seconds for me to see your response. So somebody answer and let me know how the sound's coming through before we begin. I don't want to be muting this whole thing. Speaking in mute all the way through. So don't see any responses yet. Shall I assume that the sound's coming through fine? Um, all right, I'm not going to sit here and just wait in silence to. There we go. Hi, Diane. It's a little muted and echo here. Okay, that's what we needed to know. Thank you, Carolyn. Have trouble with sound, but it seems to be something in the mountains, in the Georgia mountains specifically, in the North Georgia mountains specifically. Um, so we're going to address something today that seems to be a constant issue with a lot of artists, a lot of people I work with. Eventually, sound is quiet, she says. Eve says the sound is quiet. Don't know what that means. Um, the color of issue, almost everybody I work with individually, and even students I work with in groups, the issue of hue versus color, and I know it's hue, continues to be an issue. So I decided that we're going to focus this chat on that topic and give it a good working over and see if we can't give you some clarity on the difference between hue and color and how it is hue that governs color more than anything else. The light's going to affect it, the shadow's going to affect it, but the hue is going to determine the color every time. How the hue is used. A pronounced echo, Mary Ellen says. Yeah, we're going to try to get rid of that. So I'm going to stop talking here, and we can go directly into the video, and hopefully while the video is playing, Roger can get videos out of sync with sound, which is echoing. Oh my goodness. Well, this is not a way to get a discussion started, but everybody hang in. You know, we always like to start these with a video that explains the concept, talks about the concept. And our members, our Studio Insider members, will be asking questions, I hope, afterward. So if you will, jot your questions down while the videos play and as they come up, and then we will answer those after the video is finished playing. So, don't know why their sound is low. There are two now that have complained about that. When one says sounds fine, I don't know. Okay, Roger, are you ready?
Yeah, let's go to the video.
Okay, we're going to go with the video now. So we'll see you on the other side.
I'm calling this chat hue versus color. Why? Because I've learned that it's how we label things that will influence what we do with them. For example, what would you call the color of this wood? The majority of people would call it brown. Some painters might call it burnt umber, or some might call it burnt sienna. Others who want to be more specific might say, well, it's a mixture of burnt sienna and burnt umber. But would you be surprised if I told you that none of those labels are hues? None of those labels tell us what to do to mix this color. Some might argue you don't need to know what hue's in there. Just get some burnt umber, maybe some black and some burnt sienna, perhaps a little bit of white or perhaps a little yellow ochre, and you've got what you need to make this color. Well, even all those colors I named are not hues. They give you limited information about what you might do in order to paint this, but they don't tell you what's in it. And here lies the issue of hue versus color. Brown, of course, is a word we use to describe a range of certain colors. Burnt umber is a word we use in order to describe a particular tube color. So is burnt sienna. So is yellow ochre. But none of those describes the hues that are present in these colors. Here's what I'm talking about. I have my color reader here. If I take just a section, let's say right here, and allow the color reader to read that section, we can see all along here, we're seeing that particular color. But what is the color reader telling us about it? One thing it's telling us is its value. We see right here. Its value is dark. Another thing it's telling us is the saturation right here. And along with that, it's telling us the hue. If you're familiar with my color reader, you know that this section of the color reader reads the hue, and at its most saturated, this is the hue that we're looking at right here. The color reader also tells us the value I just pointed out right here. And it tells us the saturation. In other words, how much of that hue is present in that particular color. So again, if we read it right here, we see that the saturation is very low. What causes that saturation to be low? Our color wheel can tell us that. We pull this back up to fully saturated, and right here we see our color reader is reading that in the orange range, leaning more towards red-orange. So the hue present, the actual hue in this color, is red-orange that ranges about right here. And what causes that desaturation? It has in it a green that has some blue in it. How do we know that? Because our experience has taught us that adding a complement to a color or a hue will cause it to be desaturated, will subtract some of that hue out. And so what we have here is not the hue of brown. There is no such hue as brown. We have the hue of red-orange desaturated with bluish green. Let's play with that for just a moment. I'll pull the color reader right up here, and I want you to notice that almost anywhere I click in this brown area, the indicators on the color reader stay in those same ranges. Gets a little lighter in some places, moves a little bit more towards saturation and a little more away from saturation. But we, in essence, see a variation on burnt umber. That still doesn't tell us the hue. So let's play with that idea for a moment. Let's go back into that general area where we were reading before. Let's put a splotch of that color right over there. Pull the color reader down and let's play for a little bit. We've determined that what we are seeing there in that color is the red-orange hue that's leaning towards red. If we bring that up a bit so we can see the full saturation, the saturation of every hue gets less as it gets less light, goes into the dark, and it actually gets a bit less as it receives more light, going towards light. So for every hue, there's a place about halfway between the lightest light and the darkest dark where we can see the full saturation, all the hue that's possible to see in that particular hue. So we're seeing a red-orange leaning towards red here. We've already discovered that the blue-green leaning towards green on the other side. So here are two splotches of both of those in that same value level, a full saturation so that we can see it. Now here's what we have. Within all this brown, those are the two hues that are present. Varying proportions and in varying values. But those two hues are present in every variation we see in this wood. We might call the color brown, but the hue is red-orange, a desaturated red-orange. And we know that for that desaturation to happen, it has to include its complement in it. Now, to make that even truer, let's put those two colors in the same value range and show you those two colors in the same value range. There they are right there. So now we've got the two hues in their value range. And I said two colors that time because when we're identifying the colors, we identify the hues according to their hue names. And those hue names will remain the same no matter how light or how dark or how saturated or how desaturated. The color names we give those might vary. We know the color name brown's been around for a long, long time, but other color names may also be given to that particular color, but the hue stays the same. I want to break that down just a little bit further. These are the tertiary hues that we see. That may be a new word to you, but our hues are made up of primaries, yellow, red, and blue, which are the basic hues from which all other hues, when mixed, are formed. The secondary hues are those made of two primaries, orange, violet, and green. But then we have those all-important tertiaries that are mixtures of primary and secondary. Those are where we're going to find most of our variations in hue, because these can move, these can change. This yellow-green can change towards yellow until we can't call it yellow-green anymore, or it can change towards green in the same way. So a yellow-green can have a broad range of possibilities or combinations of yellow and green. Blue-green, a broad range of possibilities between blue, the primary, and green, the secondary. And it works that way all the way around the wheel. And so when we look at it from that point of view, we have two tertiaries here. Now here's where it can really come in handy when you're mixing. So if we begin with the tertiary of red-orange leaning towards red, what do we have? We tell ourselves in the color what we have. Red-orange tells us it's red plus orange. Orange tells us it's red plus yellow. So what we have is red plus yellow. What do we have in this tertiary? We have blue-green. So what that tells us, the labels that we use, remember, when we say blue-green, we have blue plus green. So for blue-green, what do we have? We have blue plus yellow. Now we've broken that down to the basic hues that we're seeing in that color brown. So when we're saying color brown, that doesn't tell us anything about color mixing. But when we analyze it as to the hues that are in that color brown, we can go to the level of the tertiaries we see in there, or we can even break the tertiaries down to the primaries we see in there. And by knowing that, we can know what colors to mix together to get those variations that we see. So the reason knowing hues as opposed to colors, or knowing the hues that are in every color, is helpful for the painter is that if you know what hues are in any color you're looking at, or if you can detect the hues in any color you're looking at, and you can detect how much of that hue is present, to what degree it's been desaturated or saturated, and also you can read what value it is, especially helpful when you're using your tube colors. Then if you have that information, if you train yourself to see hue as an element of color like that, then when you have a subject like this, you could begin with your burnt umber if you want to. You can take shortcuts. We have all variations of combinations of hues in various characteristics available in our tubes. But if you know them according to their hue and the things I just outlined for you, you could start with burnt umber here, and then you would know, because burnt umber has red-orange in it, and you see red-orange in this subject, And you see also not just red orange, but you see orange in this subject. You will know that you can add a higher saturation of orange to your burnt umber, or even a yellow orange if that's what you see. And you can use your knowledge of hue and how you can change that hue when you're painting and change the value and saturation of that hue and be able to mix any color you want without any frustration. Let's stop now and give you a chance to ask your questions.
All right. Um, we're still fiddling with sound here, and there's still going to be a little bit of an echo. We know where it's coming from, but we can't figure how to get it completely turned off. But Roger's going to try to see if he can at least lower it. So let's try to deal with it. Do you have questions now about those ideas I brought up for you in the video of the difference between hue and color, and how it's hue that controls everything we see in the way of color, and it's what we do with hue that makes hue, what hue makes hue behave, makes hue either appear in smaller amounts or larger amounts, or how saturated, to whatever degree it's saturated, that sort of thing. So, do you have questions now? Let's see. Carolyn says, I think I understand changing the hue, but how about the value? The value, um, if you think about, if this is where I would love to have my little color reader to guide you through. No matter where the value is, where the value is, every hue has the ability to be all values. Every hue has the ability to be all values. Now we will have the local hue, or what we call local color. That's how the color that we're seeing, like if we're it's a surface color. If we were holding something in our hands, that's one color, one hue, and then that would be its local color. Once that goes into shadow, any kind of shadow, that's going to get darker. And that, it just means the hue gets darker, unless something else happens to it. The hue gets darker. As we shine more light on it, the hue gets lighter. So hue at every one of those saturation levels can be very dark, can be every degree of dark and every degree of light until we can't see the hue anymore. But if you can see the hue, if you can detect the hue, then that you know that is the hue. Whatever hue you're detecting is the hue, no matter what value. So it can be very dark or very light. I don't know that I explained that very well, but just let me know, Carolyn, did I explain it? Remember that we're changing, when we're working with hue, we're changing lots of things every time we mix color. If we mix a color, if we mix two hues together and they are the same value, well, then they're going to change each other, but the value's not going to change. So if say if we mix two analogous colors together, so if we mix together, I talked about that in the video. But if you mix one analogous color into the other, it's going to change the hue. But if it stays the same value, it doesn't change the value. If the complement's mixed into it, it's going to change the hue. It's going to change the saturation of the hue, but it won't change the hue. So I think maybe working with that is the way to understand it. You know, we try to understand so much about painting theoretically, and I know that a lot of people will watch lots and lots of quick tips, and they will theoretically, I think they understand it, but then when you actually do that, you have the experience. The experience is a better teacher than just trying to understand it intellectually. So Carolyn says, say you have a hue blue, you want it darker, the complement is orange, change saturation, what to add for darker. Well, it depends on the value of the blue you're working with. So you see, if you have blue like ultramarine blue right out of the tube, it's already very, very dark. So that particular value of the hue can't go much darker without losing all of its character of hue. It can only go lighter. But if you have a blue coming out of your tube like cerulean blue, it's a lighter value already coming out of your tube, and it's not just blue. It's blue leaning towards green. Let's distinguish the hue there. But it's more of a middle value coming straight out of your tube, so it has the ability to go lighter by mixing white into it or mixing another value into it, or going darker. And in that case, by mixing something like ultramarine blue into the cerulean blue, you're going to darken the value. But you're also going to change the hue, because the ultramarine blue is a blue that leans more towards violet, or as I explained there, whereas cerulean blue is a blue that leans a little bit more towards green. So I think the idea is to not think of any single color as a value. Think of it in terms of a single hue in whatever value it is. And so as it comes out of the tube, it's going to be whatever that value is as it comes out of the tube. But we can't make general assumptions about any single hue without knowing what value it is to begin with. So does that help any at all? I see. Thank you so much. Mind is busy adjusting. I think if you have the experience and you play with that, it begins to come clear. It really becomes clear when we're in the process of painting and of mixing colors. When we're mixing, when we need value changes and we are doing what we know will cause those value changes, or when we need saturation changes, either towards more saturation or towards less saturation, then it's when we start thinking like that, that we begin to color mixing becomes clear to us. I think, I may be mistaken, but I think one of the big problems with color mixing is that as beginning painters, too often you're taught to think in terms of tube colors. You're given instruction that teaches you about specific tube colors. They'll tell you, put these tube colors on. If you mix this with this, you're going to get this, and that sort of thing. Well, that tells you what those tube colors are going to do to each other, but it doesn't tell you in general what color does to color, or how you can manipulate color to make it, to create the color that you want, or even how to see what color what hue you're actually looking at, especially when you're looking at a neutral. All right, so Maggie says, this is wonderful, can't wait till Wednesday. Going to clarify a lot for me. I hope so. I think so. I think maybe, I've been thinking about this a lot. I spent my entire life studying color and did a major part of my graduate work in color. And I think that the real key to understanding color is simply understanding hue. Because the hue is the component of every color that gives it the characteristic that makes us call it what we call it. And so we have those hue names that I think of as the original hue names, pretty much the original hue names. It's kind of like gravity. If you think about gravity Gravity was given that name, the name gravity, when the observation became conscious that when you drop something heavy, it's going to fall. Or drop something light, it's going to fall. We all know about the concept of gravity and Newton and all that. My point is this: we have that label, gravity. We know it's a given. Gravity is a given. We have the label sun. That's a given. It tells us what we're talking about. And I think in color, if we can stick to those generic labels that define specific hues and then work in terms of what they do to each other, rather than to try to think color out through other words. Now, let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. The key words, yellow, the primary words, yellow, red, blue. They're givens. We know what they are. We know them when we see them. Orange, green, violet. Same thing. And then the tertiaries that are always a combination of a primary and a secondary. Well, okay, magenta. What does that tell you? It doesn't give you information beyond a specific kind of red-violet. But if you allow your thoughts to go, what is magenta? What makes magenta? And when you realize that what makes magenta is red plus blue in certain proportions to each other, then if you're working with magenta that seems to be looking a little bit more red than another magenta that might look a little bit more towards blue, you know what to do to it. So Bobsy asked, if I'm painting a yellow flower with some petals in shadow, how do I mix the darker yellow? It depends on what hue that shadow is taking on. I'm glad you asked that question, because yellow is one of those colors that it sits there, and when it goes into shadow, a lot of times what we are seeing as yellow may be leaning a little bit more towards the tertiary. It may be leaning a little bit more towards yellow-orange. Other yellows might be leaning a little bit more towards yellow-green. Now, and so if you will look at your flower, you'll see what I'm talking about. A lot of flowers, especially I'm thinking in terms of jonquils, but a lot of the flowers, sunflowers and whatever, are not really registering right on yellow, but they are really registering a little bit more towards tertiary, taking a little bit more of that, a tiny bit of red into them, and they're leaning towards orange. And when they're leaning in that direction towards that tertiary, if you watch what the color, the hue, what the hue does when the shadow hits it. Now, we can't make, if I said to you, oh, you just add a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and you'll get your shadow, I would be doing you a disservice, because then I would be giving you a formula that might not answer what you see every time. So sometimes you might see, a lot of times you're going to see the yellow in the shadow portions of yellow, something that's in yellow, you're going to see that because it's in shadow, we're not seeing as much yellow in that shadow. So you might see that as more, it may look more orange. It may look more desaturated in orange, or sometimes you even see a shadow in yellow looking more red-violet, very desaturated red-violet, or red-orange, very desaturated. And there's the other thing. If we know that, if we observe that, and if we know that yellow, let's say if we know that our cadmium yellow, for example, cadmium yellow light is yellow, or if we know that cadmium yellow medium is more yellow-orange, if we know that burnt sienna or quinacridone burnt orange or the Rembrandt transparent oxide red, if we know they are red-orange in hue, then when we see that happening in shadow, we might know that we might be able to reach for one of those to create that shadow. But we also might be able to reach for the complement of that to help create the shadow. And sometimes we can create the complement that leans more, it's not exact complement. Sometimes we can reach for a complement that is leaning more towards the tertiary on that analogous side of the yellow, and that will help give us a shadow. But when you observe the hue, observe what hue you're looking at. Not assuming anything about it, but observe what hue you're looking at. And then when you know what hue does to hue, the miracle is you know what to reach for in order to change it. So that was a long answer to a short question. Rich asked, it can be difficult to determine an exact hue of a dark desaturated color without a color reader. Sometimes the best I can do is determine whether it's cool or warm, but not much else. That's a good observation, Rich. Yes, and you're absolutely right about that, because when something very desaturated is in shadow, you remember, it is how much hue we can see in it that is our clue as to whether, as to what hue it is. And when it's very desaturated and in shadow, I think that the best bet is to start with, is it warmer? Does it feel warm to me, or does it feel cool to me? Now, if it feels warm to me, I can start on the warm side and begin to add complement to almost any color on the warm side of the wheel, and then see, is that, and in the darker range, is that what I'm looking for? Same thing is true on the cooler side. A lot of times we will be in a situation in plein air, for example, where, say, in the winter time, where there's no snow, when there's not snow in the winter time, all the trees are bare. Everything may feel like a very cool gray, especially if we're in the time of year where it just feels so cold and raw. You see my point I'm making? It just feels cool. But if we want to make a painting of that, if we want a painting of that subject, we might not want it to feel that when we look at it, or make them feel cool when we look at it. And so we could take something that is in an atmosphere or a complete resource or scene or subject that is neutral overall, and we can change it from cool to warm, because by using our warm hues, letting the warmth of the hues that come through in those neutrals be more dominant than the cooler parts of the hues. So again, a long answer to a sort of short question. That's very cool, Carolyn. Pun, yeah. Cool pun, Carol. I said, did I miss some stuff? No, I didn't, did I? Yeah. See, that's the thing that's so absolutely miraculous about color and about what painters can do with color. It's that just simple language of hue and of observing, and of being able to, a fun game that you can play. I just thought about this. I like to do this a lot. A fun game you can play is if you're in an environment where you see lots of neutrals. Say, if you're inside a house, for example, where all the walls are wooden, when you look at the wood on walls, instead of thinking of it as wood, detect the hue that you see first. Can you detect the hue you see first? And then, so when you start, if it's like a warm wood, and this goes back to Rich's comment, and actually it was more of a comment than a question. Yeah, if it's warm, if it feels warm or it's a more warmer feeling wood, then you might say, do I detect the reds in there, or am I detecting more red oranges, or am I detecting more oranges or more yellow oranges? And then you will be surprised when you start focusing your attention on the actual hue you're looking for, looking at, or questioning, searching for. I'm searching for the hue I'm seeing. And then, when you narrow it down to warm, and then you start searching, am I seeing red? Is that really a dark desaturated red? And then you say, oh, well, actually, I think it's got more orange in it. Oh, actually, I think it's got not quite so much red, more orange than that. Well, maybe it's more orange. You begin to realize. I know.
You're, you're back.
Am I back now? Can you? As they used to say on the cell phone ads, can you hear me now? I think Roger was piddling with the sound to try to see if he could get that echo out, and we haven't got it out yet. So, okay, it's good now. Yeah, well, you missed part of what I'm saying, and I won't try to repeat it again. But I was trying to go through how you can get your head, your thinking processes oriented towards seeing hue rather than seeing color. Now, color is a part. I'm not poo-pooing color, not at all. But I'm just trying to guide you towards how to see color more accurately by seeing what the hue is doing. How much hue is there? Okay, good now. Yeah, sound back. All right, good. How much hue is there? I'm sorry we haven't so many problems with sound. That seems to be a thing. All right, so are there other questions now? The questions seem to be a little bit on the scanty side today. Again, I don't know. Does that mean that I answered everything completely in the video, or does it mean that it's so confusing you don't understand it at all? One other thing about hue that is really fun to think about is when we're working with hue in our paintings, is that the visual effect that hue can have upon hue when colors are placed side by side. And we've talked about that to some degree in other chats, and those of you that have taken workshops, there are just a few people we're talking about there are familiar with that. But notice this sometime when you're looking at a painting. Notice how one hue is pulling your eye. One hue that is repeated, or a single hue family, you might say. Say a hue family, orange. Orange is a hue, secondary hue. Its family could include, the reds that still have the red oranges, and even and reds. That's analogous. And it also can include the yellow oranges and towards the yellows. That's analogous, and that's warm. So that would be more or less a hue family. But when you're looking at a painting where a hue family is being repeated, try this. Look at one area and then notice how that repetition of those hues are going to cause your eye to move from one of those hues to another throughout throughout a painting. Even if you look at this picture behind me, those orange tulips in the front, on the front row, and the orange tulips in the back, I like to say the colors talk to each other, you know? So they're actually talking to each other. Your eyes moving back and forth between those two sets of those are in the orange range. Some of them are leaning a little bit more towards red, orange. Some have areas of them that are leaning a little bit more towards yellow orange, I see. But you see the overall orange family of tulips that we see there. Well, your eyes can't help but move back and forth between the foreground row of tulips and the background row of tulips because of the way color talks to color, of the way hue talks to hue. Now, and the other thing that's really fun about that is how when colors are placed together, how those that are in the more complementary range to each other will actually emphasize each other and actually bring out characteristics of each other. So you've seen me do those demonstrations before, especially in the quick tips, where if you put say if you put a red inside a red square inside of a green square, they emphasize each other. The green makes the red redder, and the red makes the green greener. Well, it's actually happening in our eyes. It's the way our eyes see these things that's doing that. But then if you put that same red square in an orange square, it doesn't seem quite so red. So the things that the effects that color has upon color, or that hue has, that's all behavior of hue. We call it behavior of color, but it's all behavior of hue. It's hue that's doing this stuff. When we're talking about simultaneous contrast, you know, how colors vibrate together. And when we're talking about the saturation and desaturation, degrees of saturation and degrees of desaturation, that's color doing something to color. That's hue doing something to hue. So if we can always go back to what hue does to hue, or ask ourselves those questions of what is this hue doing to this hue, or in our observation, when we're looking at hues, we might even notice that same thing. Like a lot of gardeners will plan their gardening, a lot of flower gardeners will plan their gardens, or landscapers will do this. They will plan plants, colors of plants according to what they do to what their colors do to each other. Not just to have, you know, certain colors appear at certain times of the year. Yeah, they'll plan that too, or they'll landscape according to that too. But one of the major things that a landscaper or a gardenscaper will look for is the designing of that, of how how hues will emphasize hues. They'll call them colors, but when people say colors, they usually are really referring to the hue of that color. And so they will actually, how the hues will emphasize each other, either by being analogous or being totally different from each other. And so it's always, I always go back to, as I said before, calling it what hue does to hue. Because I always like to say color talking to color. When it's on a paint, we're looking at colors on a painting or hues on a painting, those colors are talking to each other. And when we learn the visual language, how the visual language works, how color talks to color, what color is doing to color within that whole environment, the whole thing becomes a different, a more exciting story for us. It becomes a more exciting thing. We're not just using color just to describe things. And that's one thing that is very much distinguishes the master painters from, well, I've got to be careful how I say this. That's one thing that distinguishes master painters, is that usually when we first start out, we're as young children, we're exploring color. Yeah, but there reaches a point where we're using color to describe things, describe images. So we're using, and then too often that using color only to describe that will be as far as it goes for too many painters. But then when we can realize that we're not only describing with hue, but we are also creating with hue. And so when we're creating with hue, we're creating those conversations that Hue will have with Hue on the canvas itself. Let's see. Bobsy says, I'm grateful that you suggested making swatches. When I make a swatch, I find that I have trouble matching what I see. Practicing swatches really helps. It helps, yes, it does. And we have something visual, concrete to compare that. They're great. Rich says a friend was describing something as green the other day that looked distinctly yellow to me. I didn't argue, but we could both be right, couldn't we? Yes, you could. It could be it's possible that you might be seeing more, it's possibly you might be seeing more yellow-green. It also depends on the saturation of it. Because I suppose you might be seeing more yellow-green, and your friend might have been seeing more of the green in it. But if you got down to the specific hue, both of them begin to sort of identify that specific hue. Is it really green in that primary, or is it a green that's leaning more towards yellow? And from your viewpoint, what were you really just seeing yellow, or were you seeing a yellow-green that was feeling to you more green, more yellow than green, or more yellow? There we go. That's smart, Roger. There it is. So there is a yellow leaning towards green. And so therefore it's a yellow-green. And that is a really good example of that little section of the video I showed you where I talked about the tertiaries. The tertiaries are where all the action happens in hue. Primaries are more exact. A primary is going to always be a primary. It's going to be a primary, it's going to be a primary. Secondary is going to be a secondary, it's going to be a secondary, it's going to be a secondary. But when a primary starts taking on some of that secondary, it becomes a tertiary. And the tertiaries are where all the exciting things happen in hue. That's where all the variation happens. So we're looking at a tertiary. It's yellow leaning towards green, but it's still looking very yellow. And you could, if you had someone that was just thinking in general terms of, color and not what hue actually does, they'd say, that's yellow. And you might say, that's green. Well, you're both right. It's yellow-green. That's a good point there. All right, let's see, Carolyn, we can change what we actually see to bring out what we want to say. Is that right? Yes. Yes, yes, yes. And that's one way we do it. Change what we actually see to bring out what we want to say. That's when we start creating. There are many levels or many branches, you might say, of ways to create. But one way we can be creative is to take what we see, take shall we say, the information of what we see, but make changes in that is more towards what we want to say. My earlier example, I don't know whether I was talking this example while the sound was off or what, but my example of when you're looking at those bare woods in the wintertime when it's very, very cold, but you want to communicate. This is maybe a kind of a weaker level, but if you want to communicate warmth or have more of a more feeling of warmth to those colors rather than emphasize the cold, yes, then we would change the overall hue into more of those interpretations of warm hues rather than cool hues. Now, when we're making those changes, let me point this out, that it's a good idea always when we're doing realistic painting and we're reinterpreting hue in any way, whether reinterpreting in great extremes or whether we are just giving a slight difference, changing the temperature or whatever, stick to the value that you're seeing. The value that we're seeing is the structure of light and shadow. Those values that we're seeing are telling us something about it's telling us what the light's doing. It's telling us what kind of light it is, and so we can convert those into black and white, and we can still see the images. But it's a good idea to always stick to the light shadow pattern if that is when you are making a when you make a change in color. So are there any other questions? We're getting just about close to conclusion time. You got the echo cleared out.
Yeah, we're in sync too.
We're in sync and the echo cleared out. Well, shall we start over?
Yeah, I got your color wheel up too.
Huh?
Got your color wheel up too.
Oh, you got my color wheel up. Oh yeah, I see it now. Well, so I tell you what I would like to do at this point. If there are not any more questions, I'd like to just remind everybody, not only the ones that are watching now, but the ones that are will be watching this afterwards, because usually a lot more people watch these replays than are actually with us when we're having the live stream. But to remind you that we have the Studio Insider membership to YouTube, which enables the question asking. So if those of you who are subscribers, or just those of you who are just watching, that are not subscribers, and if a question came up, you really wanted to ask that question, the reason we limited that was because without that kind of a way of narrowing down questions, it ends up being more than we can handle, and so we do that. So the membership is it still at the same price, Roger? Yeah. $4.99 a month. You join from any of our video quick tips or live in stream, any video we have on YouTube from our channel in the Studio Art Instruction is our channel. So from there, or from any video, you can click join, and you can also be sure and click to receive notifications, and that way you always will receive an email when we're doing anything, when a new video comes up, new quick tip comes up, when we're going to have a live chat, when we have something special to say to you, that sort of thing. But I want to also say that not only do you get that privilege, but you also get the privilege of a free video lesson every month. Now, we have two websites, one DianeMize.com, that was the original website, where we have individual lessons that are built in series. And we have 40 series, and I think right now we have 170 lessons there. And so you get a free lesson, your choice of a free lesson, every month for as long as you are a YouTube member. And so and then also you're going to get every second Sunday, you get another little video tip, a little snippet from one of the lessons that is just a little bit of an appetite wetter, you might say. So there's that, and the lessons have been really, really popular, and we've gotten really a lot of strong feedback from that. Now, the other thing I'd like to inform you of, and it's not that I'm trying to use this to do advertisement or anything, but just want to make everybody aware that we've got these things going on. I think of them as opportunities to learn. But we also have the Academy now, and that's a different website, DianeMizeAcademy.com. Both of those are .com. But on the Academy, we have full courses, and the courses are each on a single subject, and the courses are outgrowths of the workshops that we do. So they are full length, usually, typically about 3 to 4 hours of video, but lots of information, lots of work for you to do. And now we're offering membership on the Academy. That's a separate membership from the YouTube membership. It's simply becoming an Academy member gives you access, for as long as you're a member, access to all the courses that are there. So you could join, pay a monthly membership fee, and then just study. Just take courses at your own pace. All the courses are there, self-guided. You take them at your own pace on the Academy. So just go take a look. Go take a look and see what's there, and see if that's something you might be interested in, because it's all enrichment. And I think it also gives you a chance to choose areas where you really need to study. So I hope I didn't offend anybody by making those little plugs, but it's all part of the program. The chat is a part of the program. The tips are part of the program. The lessons are part of the program, and the courses. And we have all of that. What we're trying to do is just help people discover ways to become more, to express their own voices, their own individual voices, with masterful techniques and composing skills. So that is sort of what we're up to. All right, do we have any more questions? I see we're coming right up on the final hour. I really apologize for the echo and the sound and everything, but at least we finally got it corrected. Carolyn says, oh yes, okay. So I guess there are no more questions, but yes, Roger.
Program note.
Program note.
In June.
Oh, that's right.
It'll be the 4th Sunday instead of the 3rd.
That's right. Program note. You hear, Roger? I will repeat it. In our June chat, our June YouTube chat will be on the 4th Sunday rather than 3rd Sunday. For those of you who didn't know, the 3rd Sunday is Father's Day. So the June chat will be on 4th Sunday.
The 25th.
The 25th. Just look for that. So we'll see. I hope to see all of you back here in June on the 4th Sunday, and with another exciting topic to explore. Meanwhile, thank you all for joining us, and I hope that you'll go out and explore Hues. So that's it for now, and we'll see you next time. What?